Hello, everyone. This is Alan Samuel Cohen, and welcome to the EQ Advantage interview series. I'm here with my pal, Henry Schoenfeld. Is it Schoenfeld or Schoenfield, Henry? It's both, did you say?
Yeah, Schoenfeld.
Sondheim, Sondheim, Sondheim. No, I don't. it's
All the whole.
it's great to see you here. Before we plunge into the program today, I want to just welcome everyone. Please put in the chat where you are today, what city you're located in. I am here in Manhattan. Henry, where are you right now?
Massachusetts, just outside of Boston.
Massachusetts. Please say hi. Let us know where you are. And if you're catching this on replay, hit hashtag replay because we'd love to know who's joined us so we can follow up with y'all. And we're going to be having a great conversation here about finding purpose and finding your calling. We're going to talk for about 30 minutes and then we're going to take questions. I'll be checking the chat along the way. And firstly, so as I said, my name is Alan Samuel Cohen. I'm an executive and leadership coach, and I do a lot of work with male coaches, solopreneurs, and leaders and their teams, and work with emotional intelligence as the foundation for all that I do. And EQ stands for emotional quotient, also known as emotional intelligence. And Henry and I will chat a little bit about that as it relates to his topic. And the EQ Advantage is it's a group program that I offer for men and men coaches and solopreneurs and entrepreneurs and leaders. It's also a Facebook group for those same men. So if you love what you're hearing and you want to be a part of the conversation, head on over to the EQ Advantage and we'll be happy to welcome you there. We talk a lot about emotional intelligence and why it's so important for men. And this is the launch week for the EQ interview series. And we've already had some great interviews with some great inspiring men. And the theme of each of our calls is real men, real conversations about topics that are important, of interest, what we feel are of interest to men, but women are absolutely welcome to partake in these conversations. And today's topic is responding to a deeper calling. And so before we get into the program, let me share a little bit about our fantastic guest. And I am so delighted to introduce Henry Schoenfield. Henry not only is an exceptional man, an exceptional spiritual coach, trained spiritual director, ordained minister. He is someone who I consider a friend and a colleague. He's an active member of our EQ Advantage community and is currently enrolled in our group coaching program. He's working on some amazing things, which he's going to talk about on this call. He's passionate about working with people and institutions in times of change, like the ones that we're going through right now, people who are in transition and transformation. He draws on the spiritual wisdom of the contemplative Christian tradition, as well as other spiritual traditions. He helps people cultivate a space of deep listening for how they're being called and led to meet the present moment with an open heart. He's been such an inspiration to me, especially during these turbulent and confusing times. And welcome, Henry. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Alan. It's so great to be here today.
So Henry, so that was your bio, that was your written bio with a little bit of embellishment. But I'd love for you to share your really interesting background, your journey, and how you got to coaching, and just some color.
Yeah. So what's really cool, Alan, is that my whole life has kind of existed in places of overlap. And between even the overlap I find myself in today of coaching and of spiritual direction and spiritual leadership, living in that kind of overlap has been my life story. I was born in this family that had mixed ethnic roots. My mother's side of the family was Cherokee. My father's side of the family was Jewish, and we just sort of grew up in the overlap of those two as kind of Christian for whatever reason. And, going through the seminary, being ordained a Roman Catholic priest, leaving the priesthood, finding my current denomination, the United Church of Christ, and like all of that has really existed in the overlap. And then some of the work that I've been able to do in the last 20 years of ordained ministry, I'm talking about like hospital chaplaincy, hospice chaplaincy, helping people to really prepare for the transition to the next life, and helping to train students in that sort of thing, And so I think that living in this place of overlap, which much younger in my life was a really uncomfortable place to live because I just wanted to fit squarely in one place. Now I really appreciate it. It's not only living in this overlap, but really it's about living in this liminal space, in this space of such possibility. And so this is just the place that I've been able to find myself and find my work, which is really quite fabulous.
Fantastic. So I want to jump into the topic, but before we do, I want to. You had a very funny reaction when I named this program. The EQ Advantage part was, that was already in stone. But the tagline of "Real Men, Real Conversations." I'm not gonna tell the world what you said, but you had a great reaction, and so I want to invite you to share. Well, you can share your reaction, but you can also share sort of what you've come to, what you want to say about what it means to be a real man. I put it in air quotes.
Yeah. No, I was really kind of drawn in by this whole idea of real men, because I think, well, it's just never really been something that I've identified with for myself, for many reasons. But what does strike me about this term, and actually the thing that like caught me, is that, well, if we're talking about real men, then who are fake men? And where's this dichotomy, and so where I could key in on this question is at the level of integration, and I think about, in the last several years, the whole thing of toxic masculinity, right? And when you look at toxic masculinity, I think that the other side of that is integrated masculinity, right? Well, we can really accept the different parts of who we are, where we can do that with some just knowledge and objectivity and real sense of growth. And so if I had to call what is a real man, I would say that it's somebody who is on the way to integration. I mean, integration is one of those things that we can work at and never quite get there. But nevertheless, to be on that path towards bringing in all of the pieces of our lives, bringing in a recognition of our egos and personalities and what the strengths are, what their limitations are, and how we operate and move through the world in light of all of that.
I love that. I have never heard real man as defined in that way about integration, and that's just such an interesting way to explain it. So that's awesome. That's awesome. So let's get into it. So we're talking today about responding to a deeper calling, and I'd love, first of all, for you to talk a little bit about what is a calling, right? And how did you find yours? How did you stumble upon yours?
Yeah. So, when I think about calling, I think about this thing that is generally within, right? That what we're born to make manifest, what is in our essence, what is it that the world needs to come from us, right? I think that a lot of times where we can get ourselves into trouble is to think of calling as being extrinsic to who we are, right? So that we chase after our calling, or we try to figure out, well, it's got to be out there somewhere. And of course that reflects my own sense of coming to calling, in terms of spiritual leadership, especially, and having a sense from an early age that there was something more, that there was something more to this life than just the tangible things. There's something more to relationships. There's just this something more, right? And I really think that ultimately that is at least headed in the direction of calling. The challenge is that we often want to try to figure it out, and in trying to figure it out, we can go astray because calling is really about listening in, right? Increasing the sensitivity of all of our intelligence. And I think about the intelligence of our minds, the intelligence of our hearts, the intelligence of our bodies. And we can really, once we can really bring all of those centers of intelligence together and get quiet, then we can allow calling to emerge from within us where it's always been.
And and we were having a little conversation before we went live about what's happening in the world right now and how perhaps many people are using this moment in time to reflect on what their calling is, or they're present to the fact that they've lost their way. So
Mm-hmm.
what do you want to say to those folks?
Well, so, look, this moment that we're in is absolutely one of utter disruption, right? There is loss, there is grief, there is confusion all over the place. And the first thing that I would want to say to people is, like, if you're kind of getting the sense of that, if you're getting the sense of, gosh, some days are just really hard. Well, there's good news in that, because days are really hard.
Mhm.
And it also means that you're quite sensitive, which is a good thing. Because if we were not sensitive, then there's no possibility of opening up, right?
Right.
So to recognize the reality of the day, and to recognize that in disruption, there is possibility, right? You think about when a building is built. Once it's built, it's there, you know? It's only when the cracks start to appear that something new can come into being. Right? And I believe that that's kind of one of those moments that we're living in right now, where there are cracks, and in the cracks, there are possibilities, which doesn't deny the fact that these are hard times. These
Sure.
are hard times,
Sure.
and there's possibility.
And how is it that some people seem to be adapting better than others? And maybe you can relate that to spirituality or a sense of calling.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons perhaps why some people can be adapting better than others. Resilience, in the emotional intelligence language is certainly one of those ways. Though I also think that having deeper roots, I mean, we so many of us, we walk around the world as if our way of looking at things is reality, you know, our fixed perspectives, our patterns of thought, feeling, acting, all of that is the only way. And yet there is a deeper way, right? We are rooted into something deeper. And the advantage, I think, in rooting into something deeper is, first of all, we're just not like being swayed around so much
Yeah.
by the news cycle or by what's happening out there. And when we kind of really get down into our roots, we realize that we're connected to something much bigger, you know. I mean, you think about like the difference between a drop of water that's by itself and a drop of water that's in the ocean. When we can really get into that sense of the depths of who we are, this vastness of who we are, well, then it's actually a lot easier to weather the storm of times like these.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're talking a little bit about awareness and and mindfulness to
Mhm.
some extent. And I've heard you talk before about awareness. What do you yeah, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, in awareness, I think about objectivity, right? Seeing things as they are, um, and to have this sense that the way that I've always looked at the world, well, it might be true and it might not be true. But until I start to draw awareness to what I'm seeing, how I'm experiencing things, well, then there's no choice, right? And so I think that's again one of the opportunities of this moment is to deepen into awareness, to deepen into practices that help us to cultivate an awareness that goes beyond our egos, that goes beyond personality, that helps us to see, the essential kind of creation that we all are.
Yeah, and what are so some of the people that you're working with or that you've worked with that are they coming to you for help in around issues of awareness are you helping them to identify their calling? Tell me a little bit about what you're how you work with folks and what you're up to right
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, a lot of the people who come to me, have a sense that there is something more. That there's a deeper calling, if you will, or a deeper purpose. And so the first thing that I help them to do is just to cultivate practices that are going to help them sense in. I mean, that's one thing that I think our culture is not so great at, and the internet, unfortunately, doesn't necessarily help. Where we can pull up a course that become an expert in whatever in days or less, when the reality is that things take time, you know.
now?
And so it's really the slow build of practice, of skill over time, that enables us to listen in, and so that cultivation of awareness over time, that has everything to do with mindfulness and everything to do with focusing our thoughts and seeing what's really going on.
Well, what I love so much about your background is that you have a coaching foundation, but you're also a very spiritual, ordained individual. So somebody gets kind of both things working at the same time, which is powerful.
For
Just
sure.
powerful. Inspiration as well as perspiration in the coaching realm, right?
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I really, I guess I'm constantly surprised, though I'm not sure why, is the depth of spiritual, at least interest in the world. And I've discovered in this people from all walks of life, from all kind of career paths, that there is a hunger to be connected on a deep level. And I've had these conversations all the way with people who are also pastors, to people in the tech field, to people in financial services, and I'm kind of constantly amazed at the depth of hunger for things of the spirit.
Yeah, yeah, and often I know I certainly coach in corporate and with business leaders, and you I'm sure do as well in your clergy and whatnot. But there often people don't even realize that it's the spiritual connection that they're missing. They just think that their job sucks or they don't their relationship sucks, but they don't realize that there's something more fundamental at the core
Right.
that they're not connecting to.
Right. Right. Yeah, that whole thought, if I could only have the perfect job, if I could only have the perfect relationship, if I could only have the perfect department, everything would be fine.
Right,
Uh,
right.
and what I love about that, the flip side, is that no matter what my job is, no matter what my relationship is, no matter where I'm living, whatever is going on, that the real work, the internal work, is always available. Which kind of goes back to when you're talking about these times.
Yeah,
It's always available to do no matter what.
Absolutely. Well, in recovery circles, you often hear the expression a God-sized hole, right? So that like there's this emptiness, this hole in one's soul, and if you don't do the spiritual work, if you don't work on connection, then there's nothing external that's going to fill you up. There will never be enough. There'll never be enough food. There'll never be enough money. There'll never be enough sex. There'll never be enough success. You'll always feel an emptiness because you haven't connected to that soul calling, that purpose, that thing that is bigger than our addictions, than our cravings, than our wants.
And the flip side of that is also true, right?
Which is,
when we do connect to the depths, when we do the work, the internal work, and really kind of start to explore the God hole, as you put it, right?
yeah,
Then everything can become an expression, right? I mean, we think about purpose as not only the receiving what our purpose is, or receiving what our purpose is, discerning what it is, but then there's the expression of it, you know. And so the person who's dissatisfied with their job, who's dissatisfied with their home, with dissatisfied with all of this stuff, once they start to really tend to the source of alienation, the source of dissatisfaction, why their spouse might look incredibly different.
right,
You know,
right, but
and is life-giving
right.
because they're filling what needs to be filled inside in order to be expressed on the outside.
Right. To the the way in which they view all of their circumstances are has changed. It's through a whole different lens, a whole different filter.
Exactly.
Love that. So how do you deepen your awareness? What are some of your practices? I know you're a wonderful you're a photographer, wonderful writer. I think those are your photographs that you post. Yes. You connect a lot to the outdoors. What are your practices?
So everything for me starts with meditation. You know, I have a daily meditation practice. These days, I've noticed getting more and more into the wisdom of my body, and so I do a lot of walking meditation, um, and then a fair amount of sitting meditation as well. You know, and that just helps to sort of helps me to connect, right? And it's cool that I sort of play around with two different traditions within meditation. One that I think about as a tradition of concentration, you know, and that's really connecting to the breath, connecting to the thoughts, all that sort of stuff that is really brings about ease. And then the other practice is complete opposite. It's a practice of surrender. It's a practice of letting go, right? Because my God, how many things do we cling to? Do we crave, right? That cause suffering, and how easy it is. We can just let it go. I mean, and that's a practical question for everybody out there. It's like, if you're really feeling tension and stress today, what are you holding on to?
I love that.
What outcome? What thing? And how can you just let it go? So the two big practices of concentration and of surrender. But then, as you say, I mean, like walking is one of my big practices. Photography. What I really love to do is to notice what's beautiful in the ordinary. You know, to notice what's beautiful, and even in street art. I love because it's a way of disruption, right? Into where the beauty is.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. Folks who are listening, and put in in the chat how you relate to this idea of a calling and what you feel your calling is, if you know it already. Love to see your responses. So Henry, tell us a little bit about some of the programs that you're working on, and some of the ways that you're working with folks, and how they can reach you, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And what's really exciting is that in this moment that I'm working on a lot of things that I'm putting out that are new in the world, you know. And so a couple of the programs that I've got going on, one is just a foundational spiritual practice. You know, realized that so many people would love to be able to have a daily meditation practice of some sort, but they've never actually been introduced to spiritual practice. And so just helping people to build a solid foundation for their practice is one of the programs that I'm working on right now. And then also, I talked about the centers of intelligence. Especially in our culture, I think that when we generally think about intelligence, it's centered in our minds, which is an absolutely valuable piece of information, but it's only a third of the picture, right? That we have this center of intelligence in our hearts and in our bodies, and then we actually need all three to be online to really wake up. And so helping to lead people in that, and then also one of the programs that I have coming up that I think is really important to this moment is particularly around white privilege, right, and recovery from that, and seeing that as a spiritual issue, because this is part of the cultural lens that blocks us from our own sense of calling, on an individual level and on a cultural level. And so those are some of the things that I have programmatically coming up.
Fantastic. And you're coaching individuals around this concept of and practice of finding your calling and developing helping people develop a spiritual practice, leading people through spiritual inquiry to help them feel be more whole and relate more to the world around them.
Absolutely, because I feel like there's always a communal dimension and an individual dimension, right? That when we try to practice all on our own, we miss something, because practice is all about connection. And yet, if we just rely on the connection outside and don't do our own work, we're not going to actually progress very far. So it's a both and.
So I want to invite every single, I didn't even ask permission first, Henry. Everybody who is listening in who wants to just have a phone call with Henry, just to learn a little bit more about what he does, to explore a little bit around this topic of spirituality, around white privilege, around all these cool things that we discussed. I encourage you to reach out to him on Facebook, the Messenger. I'll let you share your other contact information in a few minutes. I have one more question though before we do that. First of all, I'm looking at the comments. My friend Susan was so excited that we're having this kind of conversation on social media, she says, of all places, and she's actually shared it with her Smart Women Rising group. How cool is that? So we are bringing genders together, which is awesome. So we've been working together, and you've actually, this is the second group that you've participated in with me around emotional intelligence. And I'm curious, and you don't know that I'm going to ask you this question. So how fun is that? Put you on the spot. Is the connection between emotional intelligence and spirituality?
Well, it's awareness. It really goes back to awareness, right? Because when we can bring awareness to where our strengths are and where are the parts that could use some work, right? That's really strengthening our own spiritual sense, right? Because spirituality is all about integration, as we were talking about before. And one of the gifts of the emotional intelligence model is that it can help identify the places that are strong, that we can lean on, and the places that we can really develop.
Yeah, well, it's as you're speaking about it, and this is really the first time I'm thinking about the connection between spirituality and emotional intelligence. You just seem to be the right guy to have a conversation with. But a lot of the aspects of emotional intelligence, like self-regard, impulse control, emotional self-expression, all of the you can see very easily how those could tie to spirituality. If you are not connected to a sense of, to a calling, to a purpose, to some sort of higher calling, it could be one could easily go into fits of lower self-regard, because also so much of your focus is on yourself versus connection with the world at large, and social responsibility is an aspect of emotional intelligence also, which I know you're a guy who is all about that. And so, being of service to something greater can lighten us and allow us to feel more of a sense of connection. So
Sure, for sure.
So, so Henry, how do people get in touch with you? Other than
Yeah,
Facebook?
what's really exciting in this program, in the emotional intelligence, or the EQI program that I'm working right now, is launching a new website, launching a new business, and that is at thrivingspiritcoaching.com. You can certainly go there and see some of the stuff that are coming together. It's a work in progress, which I love kind of putting out in the world, because I have such a perfectionist streak in me that to put out something that's not perfect goes against every fiber of my being. And it's out there. Go see what's imperfect in process. But you can also, folks can sign up for my newsletter there. They can send me an email through there, be in contact through there. So that's a really great way of being in touch.
Great. And before I give my little call to action, is there anything that I forgot to ask you or anything that you would just wish I had asked you?
Oh boy. No, I mean, I guess what I really want to come back to is the potential of this moment, right? That so many structures have broken down. We've seen the cracks that are being exposed, that have been there for so long, and we have the opportunity to create something new. We have the opportunity to create something new here and here, right? And so, just to highlight that this moment has such potential, as well as grief and potential, right? And promise and hope. And we can really create something new right now.
Fantastic. I love your optimism and your realism and your spirit. And thank you so much for joining leading the conversation. It's so important. So thank you. Before we close, so tomorrow we've got a great conversation with another coach and good friend of mine, Eric Yosko, who is going to talk about the exceptional man and what that all means. And I invite all the fellows who are on the call to come hang out with us over at the EQ Advantage Facebook group. And it's like a man cave for emotionally intelligent men. Maybe that should be the new slogan for it. And feel free to reach out to me via Facebook if you want to learn more about emotional intelligence and how that can help you individually and with your teams, with your organizations. So tomorrow is the Eric Yusko interview at 12 p.m. EST here on Facebook. And thank you all for joining in.